Welcome to the Rebellion Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Staker. All right, so when I was coming up with the topic that I wanted to cover for my next episode, well, there was two topics, and I was originally going to separate these into two separate episodes. And then someone said, they're kind of related, right? They kind of correlate in a way. So I decided to just make this into one big episode. And what today's episode is what it takes to make it to the NBA and then crazy sports parents. Well, I should have said sports parents first because that's what I'm going to go over first. So crazy sports parents growing up playing sports like a lot of us did. We know what that means, right? I shouldn't have to explain it to too many people. Maybe people that don't ever pay attention to sports or have ever gone to a sporting event ever. Maybe I would have to explain it to them, although those people would not be listening to this podcast. And then also just making it to being a professional athlete. I'll probably speak more to specifically the NBA, just since that's my sport. That's my cup of tea. I know how to break that stuff down a little bit more in depth than I do other sports, but professional sports in general, right? So the reason these are related is because so many parents are just as delusional as kids are as far as thinking that their kids are going to make it to the pros someday. Their kids like really good at fourth grade NJB basketball. And so automatically they're already thinking about like scholarships and all this stuff that they could help their kid do to get to, be professional someday. And it's kind of unbelievable, right? And it's a type of culture that I was kind of brought up into. Fortunately, I didn't have crazy sports parents, though. They had their moments, as I will as a parent. My son's only one right now. But I do live this all the time through my niece, my nephew, and I'm just totally involved in this whole subject that I'm going to cover today. So, well, let's get into it. So first of all, let's talk about crazy sports parents. So what do I mean by that? So crazy, quote unquote, crazy sports parents are often categorized by, like really intense behavior, unrealistic expectations, this tendency that they live vicariously through their child and their athletic achievements. So this can manifest as being very overbearing, excessive pressure on the kids, and even a lot of negativity towards the coaches and other parents. All right. And this can cause so many problems. It can hold your child back from reaching their full potential, and it can hold them back from just developing as a person in life. You really don't understand how much of an impact crazy sports parents can have on their kids, not just with sports, but just in life in general and even into adulthood. And I'm going to give a lot of examples about that today in this episode. So I will start off this conversation by talking about my background. So those of you who have already been listening to this podcast a lot, you know that I was a basketball player and I played basketball my whole life. I started off playing in third grade and I was not good. I don't know how many players made it to Division I basketball that wasn't good the first time they played. It's probably a low percentage would be my guess. But I didn't score a single basket the entire first league I played in. I did not score once. And that's unheard of, right? So going from where I was then to where I ended up going is pretty insane. But now as far as my parents went, my dad was an athlete. My mom was not. My dad came from a sports family. My mom did not. So my dad kind of, took control of all the sports. He was a baseball player. That was his main sport. He also played soccer, but baseball was kind of, where most of his expertise was. So he put us in a lot of sports growing up, which is good. And I'm going to get into that in a little bit, the importance of exposing your kids to various sports and not just the one sport that you like the most, right? So he put me in basketball, and of all the sports I played, I played baseball, I played soccer. I ended up playing volleyball later in life. As a kid, basketball was the one that I really loved. Okay, that was the one that I decided I wanted to put all my time and energy into. So I got better and better and better every year, starting when I first played in third grade. So I went from third grade, where I didn't score a single basket all season, to fifth grade, where I made the all-star team. And the reason I got so much better is I just played every day, right? And sometimes as parents, we want our kids to improve in this sport so badly, but they just don't enjoy playing the sport, right? They don't enjoy it anywhere near as much as they do playing video games or playing on their iPad, okay? That's a whole nother separate topic for another episode, which is the obsession that kids have with technology and devices and screens. But when I was a kid, nothing was more fun to me than going outside and playing basketball. Even to this day, I'm 37, I'm in terrible shape, my whole body hurts, I can't play competitively anymore. I still get such a good feeling from stepping onto a basketball court and just shooting around, escaping reality, being in my own world, and just playing basketball, right? And that was why I improved so much, is because I would just go in the backyard and played every day. Not because like I had it in my head, like I got to get better, I got to work hard. It was fun. Playing basketball in the backyard for me was like how other kids are with video games, okay? And I hope my kid is that same way as far as he wanting to play outside versus playing with screens indoors. Okay, why all that is relevant is that led to me going down the competitive route of joining a club team. Okay, I joined a club team, which is a travel team. It becomes a lot more competitive, a lot more serious at this point. This isn't just the NJB rec league ball anymore where every kid has to play. It's more about having fun than winning. Okay, this is not like that anymore. This is a lot more serious. And keep in mind, times were different when I was a kid, right? The participation trophy wasn't a thing. If you finishing second place wasn't okay, right? It was about winning. And I just wasn't really ready for competitive basketball at that time. First of all, I was a late bloomer, and it took me a long time before I hit puberty, right? So I was still, a little kid with this high-pitched voice, no hair anywhere on my legs or anywhere but the top of my head. And I was playing against other kids who were almost essentially grown men because they had already hit puberty. So I really, really struggled in middle school when I got to that competitive level. And the main reason wasn't because I hadn't hit puberty. It was because I lacked confidence. The other kids were bigger and stronger than me. So I played on a team where I wasn't one of the better players. And this team traveled to California all the time. We played in all of the Vegas tournaments. And I didn't enjoy playing for that team, and I really struggled. And so I just have these memories of after games, my dad kind of you could just tell he was so frustrated with me because I played scared. I didn't play tough. And that was the only thing that my dad would yell at me for, or he would really get on me about. It was not like playing like a weakling, playing like someone who's afraid. He felt embarrassed that I was out there, getting thrown around, or other kids were tougher than me. Other kids were ripping the ball from me. He hated that was how I played, right? And the reason I played that way is, I was scared. I lacked confidence. I didn't think I could do anything against these kids who were so much bigger and stronger than me. And, that changed drastically when I hit puberty. I grew 7 inches, and then I became more talented than majority of the players I was playing against, right? So that was kind of my background growing up, playing basketball, playing competitive basketball. And that was typically what my dad would get on me about. It wasn't the X's and O's. It was toughness, playing hard, not playing scared, that sort of thing, right? And then also growing up, I would see so many crazy parents all the time. I mean, parents that are just going off on the refs. They're starting fights with other parents. They won't shut up the entire game. They badmouth the coaches. They'll even attack players on the other team sometimes. And I have this memory of thinking like, I don't ever want to be that way as a parent. Some of these parents are so embarrassing. And they're so delusional and living in their own world that they have no idea how detrimental this is to their kid. Okay. And so that was kind of the main focus behind this episode. So let's go ahead and transition into what to not do as a sports parent. First and foremost, don't try and relive your playing days through your child. Okay? Like, yes, you think about the mistakes you made or what you could have done better, or the things that happened in your life that may have potentially prevented you from reaching your ultimate goal, whatever the case may be. Don't try and start over in life through your child. You have to understand that your kid is not you. Yes, they share a lot of similarities to you. Obviously, that it's your child genetically, or even if it's not your child genetically, it doesn't matter. They're still a different person than you. They're going to view the world differently than you do. Okay? I knew like people that were big time basketball coaches, players, whatever, and they had a kid whose personality was just so opposite of theirs. So that's the first thing, is you have to understand that they see the world differently through their eyes. They're going to have different passions, different interests, okay? You can't try and start over through your child, okay? Because we can't get in a time machine and go back and redo all the things that we wish we could. And so I think a lot of parents think the next best thing that they can do is do that through their child. That's the closest they can get to starting over, okay? So There's a lot of problems that come with that. When you relive your playing days through your child, you tend to put unfair pressure on them, and you tend to force them or pressure them into doing things they don't want to do. Okay. So that's the first thing is not to view your child as a second chance in life in terms of trying to reach your athletic goals. Okay. The next thing to not do as a parent, sports parent that is, don't blame coaches or refs for when your team loses. Okay. This will teach them to not take accountability. Instead, talk to them about like, what could you have done better? All right. Too many parents are so quick to blame refs and coaches for their team losing because God forbid your child did anything. God forbid that the kids did anything wrong. People just naturally have this mindset of wanting to blame others for their problems. This is a problem in society in general. As a whole, people just want to blame others for their problems in life. And you see this play out through athletics. When a kid loses, it's never anything that the kid could have done better or what you could have done better to teach them about the game or how they could improve or how to take accountability. It's always blaming others constantly. All right. And so many parents have this mindset, and it's so toxic to the player, to the team, and everything. This toxic energy that parents possess it can ruin team cohesion. It can ruin team chemistry. It can ruin how your child performs as a player. And just to back up for a sec, I know I talked about my background as being a basketball player. I also coached. I coached for nearly 10 years. So I got to see a completely different side of things being a coach. Every parent who gets mad and thinks that the coach is bad or thinks that they know more than the coach, if you have never coached before, I suggest trying it because it might change your perspective on things. Okay, so that's the first thing. And then don't badmouth the coach to your child, okay? So the game's over, your child doesn't play bad, the team loses, whatever the case may be, you're in a bad mood, and on the drive home, you're just bad-mouthing the coach to your child, talking about how they suck, they didn't do this right, I don't understand why they wouldn't play this kid, or, constantly this problem with parents thinking their kids are better than they actually are. And that for me was the most frustrating part as a coach. And so I coached girls basketball and I coached boys basketball. And believe it or not, girls was the worst. These parents were unbelievable as far as not being realistic about how good their child was and getting angry at us when their kid doesn't play because they see their baby on the bench pouting and sad that she didn't play. Instead of teaching their kid, hey, you need to be rooting for your team. Your team won. You need to be smiling instead of upset that you didn't get in the game. Instead of teaching them that, these morons immediately go towards, they made my kid unhappy because they didn't play, and I'm going to go yell at them for that. And why did this kid play this many minutes and my kid didn't play this many minutes? And you don't know how to tell them, like, look, your kid's just not good enough, okay? I have so many stories of coaching. This episode would go way too long if I told them all. There was one game where we got bombarded with a whole mob of parents after the game. We had just lost a heartbreaker. We lost by 1 point in a very, very hard-fought, big, loud, exciting game with a lot on the line, a lot of heavy circumstances towards the result of this game, and we got ambushed. That was the way I put it. We got ambushed, and I don't know if you know that meme with Chris Pratt where he's trying to calm down like the Raptors. He's putting his hands up like, hey, don't eat me. That's kind of how I felt in this moment. And these parents were so mad that their kid didn't play that we had to have a team meeting, and I had to put a stop to that. Right? Like, you are not to approach me anymore. I will talk to your child about playing time, but I'm not going to talk to you about playing time. Okay. But these parents they don't know how to use logic. It's all emotion. Okay. There was another incident where, so my friend, she was the head coach. I was the assistant coach. It actually got to a point where I just preferred to be the assistant coach because I didn't want to deal with parents. And that's the honest truth. And that's sad because as a head coach, I could have done things the way I wanted to do them. I could have ran the offense I want to run. I could have ran the defense I want to run, the press I want to run, the out of bounds plays I want to run. But I had to resort to being a assistant coach because I didn't want to deal with parents because parents were the biggest idiots ever. So there was another time where our head coach, who was a girl, she, at the end of practice, this parent approached her I wasn't listening, but I was standing kind of close by just in case, and you could tell it was bad. And basically, he just berated her for the next 20 minutes of how bad of a coach she is and how she does everything wrong. And this infuriated me. Like, I wanted to go fight the dude. I wanted to go fight him. That's how mad I was. Like, first of all, your ego is unbelievable. I don't know who you are, but you probably have accomplished nothing in your life athletically. And this is the biggest point I want to get across to parents who have kids who have done this, who have badmouthed the coach to their kid, who have gone up to the coach and told them everything they've done wrong, who have got angry that their kid wasn't playing and yelled at the coach. If any parent that has done this, or parents who have done this, the reason why it's so bad is, like I already talked about, it teaches them to not be accountable, to not think about what they did wrong, what they could have done better. But your kids listen to you. Your kids look up to you. Your kids are going to listen to you more than they listen to anyone else. So if you're telling your kid that the coach is bad, guess what they're going to do? They're going to think the coach is bad. They're not going to listen. So that's going to make them uncoachable. They're also going to tell the other players on the team, their teammates, that the coach is bad. So it's going to cause the same problem. So if you as a parent are bad-mouthing the coach, you are going to cause that team to not perform to their full potential just because of your ego and your idiotic opinions, okay? Even if the coach is bad, because yes, there are a lot of coaches that are really bad. Even if the coaches are bad, don't tell your child that. You teach your child to listen to them, to do what they say, because that is a life skill. That's not only going to help them in sports, it helps them in life. Okay, you need to educate them to respect authority, and that when the coach tells you to do something, you do it. Okay, I've had parents yell out in the middle of the game, telling their child to do the opposite of what we just told them to do because they think we're wrong and they always know better. Okay, they have no idea how toxic this is. Okay, I think I covered most of the stuff I wanted to talk about under that particular heading. So the next thing I wanted to talk about, don't push them too hard. This is another thing that parents do. They live vicariously through their child. They want their kid to get a scholarship. They want their kid to go pro. They want their kid to be better than all the other kids. So they force them to play every single day. They make them practice for hours. They force them to go to the gym. They put a lot of pressure on them to go to the gym. They give them a hard time if they don't work out. They give them a hard time if they don't want to go to practice. And they keep signing them up for things they don't want to do, putting them in camps, and because they know that it takes hard work to be good, and that's true. But all this ends up doing a lot of times is making the kid hate the sport. I've heard this story dozens and dozens of times in my life of like, I loved the sport, and then my parents were too overbearing, and they pressured me to do all these things I didn't want to do. They forced me to play this sport 24/7, not allowing me to be a kid, not allowing me to make other experiences. And because of that, I ended up hating it and quitting. Because they'll also become resentful, okay? They could eventually become resentful towards the parent and cause them to totally hate that sport, okay? And that's the opposite of what you want, right? Because if they hate the sport, guess what? They're not going to put in the effort to get better, and they're going to eventually quit. So don't expect perfection or tie your ego or image to your child's performance. Perfectionism is very hard expectation to live up to because, put simply, nobody is perfect. Nobody is perfect. So demanding perfectionism, this is also, how many times have we seen this as well? The kid had an awesome game. They were the best player on the court. And then instead of congratulating them, telling them good job, all they do is start talking to them about all the things they did wrong. Okay? Because they have it in their head that for them to reach their full potential and be the best athlete they can be, they can never be satisfied with how they performed. They can only focus on what they could do better. Okay? Even the best coaches in the world will tell you what you did good first before telling you what you did bad. Okay? And this goes down to the lowest level. Like parents will criticize their kid of telling them all the things they did wrong when they're in like 3rd, 4th grade. Okay? All you're going to do is make them hate the sport. All right? So just don't do that. Okay? Perfectionism, like I said, very, very hard expectation to live up to. Laying guilt on the child because their performance made you look bad. Because that's another thing. Parents have this ego. Maybe they were a really good player. Maybe they were a star. Maybe they played in college, all this. But their kid isn't as good as they were or doesn't love the sport as much as they do. So they start to feel embarrassed. Okay? Like, you need to be the best player in the court like I was. Okay? So putting that guilt on them, like, this made me look bad, it's highly destructive. Your child is not responsible for your ego or your reputation in the community. Okay, people need to remember that. Okay, don't prioritize sports over everything. And this is another thing that is way too common. You have sports parents, sports families, sports comes first all the time. This does not set them up for success in life. You need to prioritize academics. You need to prioritize life skills. You need to prioritize social skills. Okay. You need to try and set them up for success for the future. Think about what they're going to be doing the rest of their life. I don't care how talented they are. You need to give them skills to help them be able to make it in the real world. Okay. Because even if you have pro level talent, all it takes is one bad injury and now you're going to have to get a regular job like everyone else. So my best friend, he was a basketball player his entire life. His dad was obsessed with basketball. And because of that, basketball ruled over everything. And that's what every single thing came down to was basketball. It took priority over everything. And you talk to him about it now, and he has this kind of resentment towards his dad because he didn't help set him up for success in the future. He says it himself. He's like, I didn't have a future in basketball. Okay. So then when I got out into the real world, I was lacking certain things that would help me prepare or have the skills necessary to do things that had nothing to do with sports, right? And so he had to live his whole life with everything being about basketball. Okay. And all that taught him was to not really care about school, not really care about other things, not actually look into who he was on the inside and what he's actually good at. What is he good at aside from basketball? Who knows? Maybe he had an interest in being a businessman. Maybe he had an interest in being a lawyer. And he could have already started putting in effort into learning about that particular subject or that particular field and gaining all this knowledge about it at a young age and starting to learn the steps required to get to that level. Okay. But no, everything had to be about basketball all the time. Okay. And he was a very, very good player when he was young. When he was in 8th grade, he was one of the best players in the state. However, he had already pretty much maxed out his potential in a sense of he hit puberty at a very young age. So he didn't grow anymore after middle school. Okay. He, compared to the average person, he was athletic, but compared to high level athletes, he wasn't very athletic. So he didn't have a future in sports, but his dad was too obsessed with shoving basketball down his throat 24/7. Okay. And so he has this resentment towards him for that. Okay. All right. So I talked about everything that you should not do as a parent. Let's talk about what you should do as a parent. I won't spend as much time on this one. So first of all, be realistic about their potential. Just try to learn what the minimum level of talent is typically to get to a high level. So just try to be realistic. For example, let's say you're 5'10", your wife is 4'11". You weren't like a college athlete. You weren't a track star. Maybe you played basketball in middle school. Maybe your wife played soccer as a kid, whatever. You're pretty average athleticism wise. You're pretty average height wise. You need to understand if you're 5'10", your wife's 5'11", you weren't like phenomenal athletes, your kid is going to be the same way. Okay. Sometimes there's 1 in 100 million rare exceptions, but you need to understand that if that is your situation, you do not have a future in sports. Okay. I knew a guy who was 6'5", former athlete, but his wife was like 4'11", 4'10", and his kids were really, really good in middle school. And they already had a deep voice. And he's saying, he's going to get to like 6'8", 6'9", and probably looking at Arizona, Stanford. Those are the schools he wants to look at. And nobody can say to this guy, like, hey, your son's 6'2" with a deep voice. He's not going to be 6'8". That's not how this works. Okay. So please be realistic about their potential. Try to be realistic and understand that genetically speaking, they're most likely not going to have what's necessary to make it to that top level. Okay. So that's very important. Next, allow your child to play whatever sport they want to play. Let them choose. If they are playing the sport that they love, they're far more likely to have a future in it. I loved basketball. I didn't love anything in this world more than just going outside on my hoop in my backyard and shooting around, maybe playing some music, just being in my own little world, pretending I'm like this superstar NBA player, whatever the case may be. That was so much fun for me. Okay. If forcing your kids to play the sport that you want them to play is detrimental. I would love for my son to be a basketball player. I would love it so much. I could teach him more about basketball than anyone else in our family, or I could teach him more about basketball than I could any other sport. Because of my experience, I know like what I did wrong, and I could teach him what I did wrong so that he doesn't make those same mistakes. However, he might not have any interest in playing basketball, or maybe he does have interest in playing basketball, but he's just not that good. He's just not as athletic as I hoped he'd be. He's not as coordinated as I thought he would be. Okay. I, as a parent, have to realize that. Okay. Teach them to respect their coach. Again, this is a life skill. You may hate your boss. You may hate them, think they're a terrible person, terrible human being, terrible boss, but you have to do what they say or you get fired. Okay. So teach your kid to respect their elders, to respect their coach, and listen to them. Even if you think the coach is wrong, don't tell them that. That is a skill that they need to possess. Because too many kids these days don't respect their elders. We see kids are more respectful towards their teachers and coaches now than they've ever been in history. Okay, it's just this generational, I don't know what's happening. It's this new culture of millennials teaching their kids to stand up for themselves and do what's best for you, and no one can tell you what to do, and blah blah blah. And this really toxic mindset that is teaching kids to not respect authority, to not do the things that's going to help them once their parents can't help them out anymore. Okay, parents are helicopter parents, and that's also another subject for another day. All right, so be willing to let your child make his or her own mistakes and learn from them. So rather than berate or chastise them, offer advice on what they can do better. Be interested and supportive, light and playful, understanding, and be open-hearted. All right. We need to be accepting and tolerant of our child's learning process and whatever their physical abilities are. We also need to acknowledge and enjoy the child's participation and successes, and just appreciate the things that they do right, the things that they did a good job on. Again, the game's over. Rather than just going straight into everything that they did wrong, let's focus on what they did good. Prioritize that first, reinforce that behavior first, okay? And then talk to them, say hey, would you like to know what you did wrong, okay? Because I'm telling you, if you just start laying into them, they're going to get sick of it, and eventually they're going to just not want anything to do with that sport anymore. Model flexibility of your own opinions. Be willing to be wrong and move off of your position. So this one is... Oh, God. This is so many of the stuff I'm talking about today. It isn't just a problem in youth sports. It's a problem in life. And that is people thinking they know it all and that they can't be wrong and nobody can change their mind, right? We all know that person who you just can't talk politics with them because they're not willing to change their mind. They're not willing to be open to other ideas and others' perspectives, okay? And you can't grow as a person. The people that are the most intelligent, successful, well-liked, they're the ones who, instead of talking, they listen. They're the ones who are willing to be wrong. They're okay with being wrong. They understand that there's nothing wrong with being wrong. Okay? Some people just cannot be wrong. Right? Don't be that person. Okay, so I think I covered pretty much everything I wanted to cover for this particular topic. There's some really good documentaries out there that show how bad sports parents can be. And I could have given so many other examples, so many other stories, but for the sake of time, I kind of had to, conclude this portion of it. So this does bring me into the next topic I want to take about, and that is making it to the NBA or just professional sports in general, with an emphasis on, I'll speak more towards making it to the NBA. So young players who have dreams and hopes, aspirations of being a professional basketball player someday or a professional athlete someday. This is what I want to talk about, okay? So first of all, there is this unbelievable delusion among our youth in today's society of believing they're going to be a professional athlete, period. I just said period because I'm so used to talking and texting. I'm not going to erase this. I'm just going to keep going. Okay, so this delusion it appears to be getting worse, or it's hard to understand. People listening don't realize how bad this delusion is, okay? And I say delusion because it's so ridiculous that they think this. Because the kids that are saying that they want to make it to the NBA, a lot of times they're not even high-level high school players. They don't have scholarship offers. A lot of times they're not even currently playing on a team. I mean, it's like, where are they getting this? Why are people not being honest with them? Okay. So first of all, like, let's just back up. I have a lot of criticisms towards myself as a person. I will be the first to tell you everything that I don't love about myself or my weaknesses, yada, yada. But one thing I will say that I am proud of is that I am very good at being honest with myself. And I came to the conclusion that I wasn't going to be an NBA player, way before other players did. And that's because I used something called common sense. Okay. So it was probably around middle school, 6th, 7th grade that I knew that was I wasn't going to have a future in basketball, at least not past college. Okay. So I knew that these were freak athletes. And even in the middle school level, I could see other players out there that I was going against, that I was watching, that were just so high on another level of just being an insane athlete than I was, that I was like, no, it's just not going to happen for me. But some kids they can't see that, or they choose not to see it. Right. So I had these teammates in junior college. So I played at Central Arizona College, which it's a national junior college level. It's a pretty high level of junior college. And I had 2 teammates, and we're sitting in class once, and the question that was asked to us was, what are your goals in life? Like, what do you want to do when you grow up? That sort of thing. And I don't remember exactly what the assignment is. We had to write it down and then talk about it. And then my one teammate goes, my goal is to be an NBA All-Star. Not even just make it to the NBA. He said, I want to be an NBA All-Star. So let me tell you, this guy was 6'3". He was a wing player. He was very unathletic, at least compared to pro level athletes. I mean, the guy could barely dunk. He was 160 pounds soaking wet. He wasn't very fast. He wasn't quick. He could shoot pretty good. He had decent skill. But I would say he was a fringe level D1 talent at best. Yeah, his goal was to be an NBA All-Star. And then my other teammate, who was similar to him, not very athletic, very skinny. He wasn't as skilled, though. He was more of a power forward, undersized power forward, play the 3 a little bit. His goal was, it was like something really random. It was to be like in the rookie sophomore All-Star game for the NBA. And I'm just, my other buddy and I were just like, are these guys serious? And we're just like kind of cracking jokes about them. And so the reason I bring this up, because this is a delusion that's sweeping across the youth that people are not aware of. So they did a survey of asking young athletes. They were freshmen and sophomore in college basketball players at all levels, Division I, Division II, NAIA, all of that, right? And they asked them, do you believe you're going to make it to the NBA, yes or no? I think it was like 94% said yes. Okay. Typically when they get to like junior and senior year, that's when they start to like, it's more common that they'll be realistic about their future. But the young ones that were like freshman, sophomore, over 90% of them said yes. Okay. That is not confidence. That is straight up delusion, that they don't know that they have no chance of making it to that level. Okay. I teach a substance abuse awareness program for CCSD, and one of the things we do in the class is we ask kids, like, what do you want to do when you grow up? What are your goals, that sort of thing. You would not believe how many times these kids say, I want to play in the NFL, to play in the NBA, to be a professional baseball player. And then we're just like, all right, here we go again. So then we ask them, like, okay, you want to be in the NBA. So are you on your team now? Oh, no. Oh, okay. So do you play competitively? No, I just go to the park sometimes and play. Okay, so you're 16, you're not on your high school team, you don't play AAU ball. You're smoking weed because that's why you're in this class. Yeah, your goal is to make it to the NBA. And it's just like, we can't be rude to the kids, right? We got to be like, all right, well, this is what you got to do. You got to put in the work. You got to stop smoking weed. You got to do this, you got to do that. We don't want to be that guy that like crushes their dreams. But can you believe that? Like, why are these kids so ridiculous? Why can't their parents tell them, like, shut up, stop saying that? That's ridiculous. It's because the parents are just as delusional as they are. They don't understand that there's a minimal level of talent required to even be in the conversation of a potential pro athlete that most of these, the vast majority of these kids don't have? Why are kids that are short and unathletic so unaware of their talent level, so unaware of what it takes to make it to be a professional athlete? How are they that? I don't want to call them dumb, but it kind of is dumb. It's dumb, right? So there is another thing that I'll tell kids is a lot of times you get guys that are under 6 feet tall saying their goal is to make it to the NBA. And I will straight up tell them, all right, you're 5'11", you said? All right. So we should probably, if they say they're 5'11", they're probably 5'9". So if you say, so you're 5'11", probably 5'9", and you're a point guard, and your goal is to make it to the NBA. In the entire NBA, and I just Googled this, there is one player under 6 feet tall. I think he's like a Japanese guy or something. One player in the entire NBA, which when you think about it, that's the entire world because that's the best league, right? So, and then if you are 6'2", or if you are under 6'2", there are only, I believe, 7 players on a roster that are under 6'2". So if you are under 6'2", your odds of making it to the NBA are way lower than they already were, which was already like lower than winning the lottery. Okay. So there's this graphic that I like to share that talks about the odds of making it to the NFL. And it's really good. So I like to talk about it. And I've talked about it on this podcast before. So, all right. Odds of making it to the NFL. So there are a little over 1 million high school football players, 310,000 high school football seniors. And then there are 70,000 NCAA football players. Okay, and so let's see. Invited to the combine, there's 350 players invited to the combine. 256 will be drafted by the NFL. 300 players will be rookies making a team. So percentage of the players in the NCAA making it to the NFL is 1.6%. 1.6%. I want you to take a jar, fill it up with 100 jelly beans, 100 green jelly beans, and 99 green jelly beans and 1 red jelly bean. Mix it up, put a blindfold on, and I want you to reach in and try and grab 1 jelly bean. If you get that red jelly bean, that's about your odds of making it to the NFL, even if you're already a Division I football player. Put that in perspective and think about how many players make it to college level even. I'll tell you the answer to that, 6.5%. 6.5% of high school players make it to the NCAA. So they get a scholarship and they go play in college. And then even if you make it to that level, only 1.6% of those players will make it to the NFL. All right. So that's 150 NFL players reaching to year 4. So even if you get drafted, only 150 will make it to the 4th year. 2014 NFL minimum salary is $420,000. Income after taxes estimated to $252,000. So if you're lucky enough to be one of the 6.5% to become an NCAA football player and one of the 1.5% of the group that makes it to the NFL, you'll be lucky to get 3 years out of it. At a minimum salary, you won't make enough to live on for the rest of your life. So what's going to provide for you and your family after college is over? Your college education. We need to be teaching our kids to stop thinking about pro sports. Instead, we need to instill in them the work ethic to just try and be the best they possibly can in that particular sport, to understand what it takes, okay? Understand what it takes to be that successful in athletics, okay? And then instill in them to work hard at everything in life and not just sports, because you could, even if you are that talent level, you could have to get a real job someday. And so you need to be educated on all of this stuff, right? Okay, so even if you have the talent to make it to the NBA or NFL, let's say you're a 5-star recruit out of high school, you go to a top level college, even if you have the talent, there's other factors you have to think about, okay? First of all, work ethic. You have to work extremely, extremely hard. And it's so easy for people to say, like that they're going to work hard. It's so easy to say that until you actually do it. Are you actually willing to set your alarm for 4 a.m. and then get up out of bed and go work out? Are you actually willing to turn down the guys that are inviting you to come over to the party, to go to the bar and drink, to go have fun? Are you willing to turn that down because you know it's going to be detrimental? Are you willing to stop eating junk food and eat real healthy food that's going to put nutrients in your body to help you perform at its best? Are you willing to put in 2-3 hours a day in the gym? Not just go in the gym and lift a few weights and leave, but actually lift so hard to where you can't breathe and you're laying on the ground exhausted. Are you willing to put in that work? Okay, so let's say you are willing to put in that work. Let's say you do put in that work. Let's say you do have the talent to make it to the professional level. All right, it's like, all right, you're set now, right? Like you put in the work, you have the talent, so now you're set. You're going to make it to that level, right? You still don't understand the mental aspect of it. You're going against other players who work just as hard as you, who are just as talented as you, sometimes more talented, okay? And they want to take your spot. So you have to mentally have the confidence and the belief in yourself that you are going to outperform this other player who also has lots of confidence and self-belief. All it takes is that one time that you sit the bench when you haven't sat the bench in your entire life, okay? And now look at you. You're trying to deal with adversity for the first time in your life. It's the Anthony Bennett effect, right? Anthony Bennett was the best player on the court his entire life. And what happened when he made it to the NBA and he was going against players just as good as him? He crumbled, okay? People don't understand mentally how difficult it is. And with all of that I just said, even if you have that as well and you're confident and you're not afraid of anyone and all that, and you're mentally strong, IQ, do you have the IQ to make it to that level? Do you realize how difficult it is cognitively at the highest levels? Do you realize if you're a high school player, when you get to college, that you have to memorize a 6-7 page scouting report, and there's 7 different ways to guard a ball screen. Every single player, you have to do something differently. How you have to read everything on the court and be able to make a decision at the snap of a fingers, the blink of an eye, and make the right decision. Do you know how much cognitive awareness goes into this? You don't. Okay? So that's why it's so incredibly difficult to make it to the pros. All right, I'm going to read one last thing, and then I'm going to wrap this thing up. Okay? So I have a buddy who was a very good basketball player. He grew up in Utah, went to junior college, played at a high-level junior college, got a scholarship to the University of Hawaii. UNLV actually recruited him really hard, and Tark actually said to Troy is his name. Actually, it was when Tark was at Fresno State. I want to get my facts straight. He even said to him, man, I really wish I would have got you. Jerry Tarkanian said that to him. His name was Troy. He was a 6'9" forward, played at the University of Hawaii. He was an all-conference player, very, very talented. He is what I call a fringe NBA player because he was that close to playing in the NBA, and he could have played in the NBA if some other things, he did some things differently or some other things went his way, that sort of thing. That's what I call a fringe NBA player. Basically, if you play in the G League or you played in the Summer League or you have interest from pro teams, you get invited to training camps, that sort of thing. Fringe NBA player, and that's what he was, okay? So I wanted to get his feedback on kind of this topic because I wanted to get the opinion from someone who actually was at that level, okay? Someone like him who understands what it takes to get to this level. So I sent him some questions, and I want to go over what his responses were. So the first one is, what was your biggest strengths as a player, and what were your weaknesses? He said, I would say some of my biggest strengths would definitely be shooting, rebounding, and shot blocking. Weakness has a list as well. Strengths, on-ball perimeter defense, sharing the ball. I honestly wish there was a player like Jokic around when I was growing up. Would have totally changed the way I play. Okay, so he could have learned from the way Jokic plays and adopted that mindset and that skill set, that mentality, and that could have absolutely changed what his potential was, right? So next question, what is your favorite basketball memory, professional or college? He said, I would say professionally there were a few that stand out. Playing in the European Championships with Latvia for the right to go to the Olympics. The atmosphere is electric. In Italy, there are 2 on this, the same team. I had been out for 2 months with back issues. Now in Europe, they will bring in other players to try and replace you. Contracts mean nothing, so you're nervous. Fortunately, nobody was panning out. My first game back from injury, we were playing our rival sister city. I ended up with 27, and my job was secure. After I was sitting in the locker room, I could hear the stadium starting up a chant. It was for me. Troy, Troy, Troy. It wouldn't stop. The packed arena wanted me back on the court. As I came through the tunnel, they erupted, giving me chills to this day. Another was dropping 38 on a future number 2 pick in the draft, Darko Milicic. Honestly, there's a lot more to share going down memory lane now. So that was a pretty interesting response to that question. And man, talk about the feeling that would be, this entire arena chanting your name. I had some good memories as a player. I got second place in a dunk contest in front of 5,000 fans, but that pales in comparison to what Troy experienced. That is nothing compared to what he experienced. With your knowledge of the game today, if you went back in time to when you were in high school with your same brain, you have today, what would you have done differently if you wanted to maximize your potential as a player? He said, this is where my biggest regret as a player comes in. If I could go back and change anything, it would have been my work ethic. Last one in the gym, first one out. Not to say I didn't practice hard, but nothing more to maximize my potential. Just relied on my talents, and look how close I was to the league. Can't imagine my career had I put in the work. So you're hearing it from a guy who can be honest. He's not making excuses. He's not blaming coaches. He's not blaming other people or other things for his problems or whatever held him back in life. He's not blaming anyone except for himself. He says, I could have worked harder. And this is a guy that very, very, very close to being an NBA player, like as close as you can be. And even he's saying, I worked hard, but it just wasn't hard enough. And I guarantee you, he was in the gym every single day. He was, whether it was weights or basketball, he was in the gym. But even he is saying, I wasn't working hard enough. And that's what a lot of people do, is they just rely on their talent and they don't realize how much more it takes, right? Next question. How differently would your career have gone if you were born 20 years later? How much of an impact with today's basketball landscape with NIL and analytics impact how you would have developed and performed as a player? He said, I was a stretch 4 before there was ever that terminology. Guys my height, they wanted to go down low. He's saying coach wanted them to go down low if they were tall. Although I held my own, I was much more than that. So in today's game, oh my goodness, it seems like there's dozens of me out there. I could have thrived well, and I think and would have made a nice little chunk of change along the way, plus get more looks from the league. So this guy's very, very humble, right? There's a lot of players with his talent level that if they were in the same position as him, they would have said, I would have, been an NBA All-Star. I would have been this, I would have that. And he's just saying, the way he plays, which was he was a 6'9" player that could shoot, how much more valuable that is today and how differently it could have looked for him. All right, last question, and then I'm going to wrap this up. What advice would you have for a young man who has, let's say, Division I talent, but their ultimate goal is to make it to the NBA? Okay, so I want anyone to listen to this that actually has the talent that they actually maybe could make it to the NBA someday. And this is advice from someone that was in your shoes, all right? The advice I give to this day leads back to question 3. Because, man, these days, if you have Division I talent, you're halfway there. Don't rely on your talent. Be the first one in, last one out as far as, working out. Not the opposite like me. And if it still doesn't work out, you can still have an amazing career playing overseas. Okay. This was a long episode, but there was a lot of stuff to talk about, very interesting topics, a lot of things that I think are important. And I just hope anyone listening to this that has a child that plays sports, that they're going to do what's best for the kid and not obsess over them as an athlete, and do what's best for them to reach their full potential as a human being and to reach their goals in life outside of athletics. Okay, so that's all I got. This is the Rebellion Podcast. Thanks for listening.